The opening shots of the 2008 James Bond film Quantum of Solace hint at the transition from the quiet beauty and solitude of Casino Royale to the much more chaotic and messy Quantum of Solace. It's tempting to view this movie as simply the aftermath of the incredible movie that came before it. Some have even called it the epilogue of Casino Royale. It's definitely a direct sequel, and it doesn't make any sense without the context of the events that take place in Casino Royale, particularly Bond's complex relationship with Vesper Lind, her ultimate demise in that movie, and how he copes with that in this film. Quantum of Solace is not a perfect movie. It can be clunky, forced, and even hard to follow, especially in the first half of the film. As a result of all of this, Quantum is often overlooked. It exists in the shadow of the great Casino Royale. But if you understand the context that this movie exists in, and you're willing to give it a chance, Quantum of Solace is not just a great Bond film and a worthy sequel to Casino Royale. It's a fantastic movie on its own terms. There's a lot of action in this movie, and by and large, it's all done very well. After a classic Bond car chase scene early in the movie, we see the damage to Bond's Aston Martin. The damage here symbolizes Bond's damaged psyche after the death of Vesper in Casino Royale. It seems that half of the car is gone here, and for Bond, it must seem that half of him is gone as well. We see this more clearly when our captured villain, Mr. White, taunts James early in the film.
I was always very interested to meet you. I'd heard so much about you from Vesper. The real shame is that if she hadn't killed herself, we would have had you too. I think you would have done anything for her.
So we start to see themes in Quantum of Solace emerging here. What do you give up when you love someone? When you truly invest everything in another person? What is the cost of putting your trust in someone else? Especially when it all gets ripped away from you. An old deep cut from the 90s, called The Background by Third Eye Blind, explores this idea. Talking about the song, their lead singer said, "Have you ever felt like your life was in high gear, and you were right in the moment, and you were happy, and rolling into some glorious unknown future, and then have that all taken away, and then lived in sort of the post-period of that high? That's what it's like to live in the background." James Bond is living in the background during this movie, and that's what Quantum of Solace is really about. One way to deal with this feeling of emotional turmoil is to seek revenge, vengeance. And revenge is absolutely a central theme here. Quantum of Solace can simply be viewed as Bond getting revenge on the people responsible for Vesper's death in Casino Royale. As the bodies pile up in Bond's quest for revenge, the characters in the movie, we as the audience, and maybe even Bond himself, wonder where his loyalties actually lie. Is this about Bond's duty and his mission? Or is this about revenge and vengeance? Or is this about justice? Bond and Camille, our Bond girl in this movie, share this mutual desire for vengeance. For Bond, it's Vesper, and for Camille, it's vengeance on the Bolivian general who killed her family and left her house and her future in ashes. This theme of revenge is a fine way to view the film, but Quantum of Solace, to its credit, is a little bit deeper than that. Once the theme of revenge is introduced, now the movie is ready to explore some deeper ideas. In many ways, Quantum of Solace doesn't really get going until about halfway through. As Bond's body count piles up and his seemingly reckless behavior becomes harder to justify, M locks him out of MI6. Bond is a rogue agent for most of the rest of the film. He meets up with Mathis, our old friend from Casino Royale, asking for help. They both shared a friendship or a relationship with Vesper, and now they share a sense of guilt over how it all ended. Mathis offers Bond some perspective.
But I guess when one's young, it seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong. But as one gets older, it becomes more difficult. The villains and the heroes get all mixed up.
Throughout the movie, Bond is wrestling with his feelings toward Vesper, and he can't shake the feeling that maybe she wasn't just a victim of circumstance, maybe she actively betrayed him. Sometimes when you're crushed emotionally, it's easy to blame the person who you had a connection with, instead of looking internally. As Mathis says here, distinguishing right and wrong is hard. Vesper's not a villain. She's complicated. James would love it if he could just blame her, call her a villain, and move on, but he can't, and that's eating him up. Ultimately, Mathis goes with Bond to Bolivia to help track down leads on Quantum. Why does he go? Maybe it's just friendship. Maybe it's guilt over Vesper's death. Maybe it's forgiveness, trying to make things right with Bond.
Vesper, she gave everything for you. Forgive her. Forgive yourself.
Bond himself is clearly having trouble forgiving himself. And again, what is the cost of putting all of your trust in someone else? The callbacks in this movie to Casino Royale are obvious, but important.
You can't sleep.
May I fix you a drink, sir?
What are you drinking?
I don't know. What am I drinking? Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily. Shake it over rice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
Yes, sir. 3 measures of Gordon's gin, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily. Quinoa lily. 6 of them.
Bond is a fragile, almost broken person. And as we said before, Bond and Camille recognize fragility in each other and bond over it. No pun intended.
I did, yes.
There's also a sense symbolized by the submerged water, another callback to Casino Royale, by the way, that there is this unseen evil waiting to bubble up, waiting to emerge. Sure, we can get revenge for our small little injustice in this cosmic game of good and evil.
We should go.
But what happens when the real evil really emerges? We'll have to wait and see.
The longer it takes, the more painful we'll make it.
You really don't know anything about us. It's so amusing because we are on the other side thinking, oh, the MI6, the CIA, they're looking over our shoulders, they're listening to our conversations, and the truth is you don't even know we exist.
There's a bit of an iconic scene of Bond and Camille walking together, both wearing black, in mourning. They could be walking to a funeral for their loved ones. Instead, they walk towards vengeance. But what does that actually mean? On the one hand, vengeance can be cleansing, like a fire clearing a forest in order to set it up with nutrients for the future. There's also the idea that revenge is a form of justice. In Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul makes this type of argument.
Once I had a wife, my great love, She was taken from me. Like you, I was forced to learn there are those without decency who must be fought without hesitation, without pity. Your anger gives you great power, but if you let it will destroy you, as it almost did me.
What stopped it?
Vengeance.
In a lot of revenge movies, this is how it works. Revenge, vengeance, payback. Getting even is a way to set the scales of justice level again and go back to a time when things were balanced. At the end of Quantum of Solace, Camille avenges her family in terrifying fashion. Facing the fires of PTSD, she kills the man who killed her family and burned down her house, killing him in a terrifyingly similar fashion to what he did to her family. Bond, for his part, leaves Green, our villain, for dead with a stomach full of oil, just like he did to Fields. Perhaps justice is balance.
Justice is balance. You burned my house and left me for dead. Consider us even.
There's a great moment where Bond cradles Camille, surrounded by fire, and this scene is meant to echo Bond comforting Vesper in Casino Royale. In that instance, surrounded by water. The quest for revenge comes full circle. Past, present, and future wrapped up in one moment. But in Quantum of Solace, as in real life, the cleansing fires of revenge are short-lived, and the scales of justice don't really exist. Camille doesn't seem immediately relieved or in a better place after achieving her vengeance. The dead won't come back to life. There is no perfect balance. Everything is always in flux. The next breath always comes. The next event always upsets the equilibrium. Sure, there is revenge, but then what? A short-lived equilibrium doesn't make the body bags disappear. For Bond, it won't take Mathis out of that dumpster or prevent Fields from being drowned in oil. Quantum of Solace toys with this idea, and we have this interesting subversion of the whole James Bond ethos. Globe-trotting spy missions, killing bad guys, seducing women. For what exactly?
Just misdirection.
I mean, why her, Bond? She was just supposed to send you home. She worked in an office, collecting reports. Look how well your charm works, James. They'll do anything for you, won't they? How many is that now?
Ultimately, this subversion doesn't last long. This is still a Bond movie after all. But the reflections on revenge do drive Bond's character forward. Despite the vengeance that drove him through most of this movie, Bond is not a monster. He's not motivated by hatred. He goes back to save Camille when he doesn't have to. He doesn't kill Vesper's treacherous boyfriend when maybe he could have. Bond calls it duty, but maybe it's just his version of good, in a callback to Mathis's good and evil speech earlier in the movie. In the final scene of the movie, Bond says to M, "You were right about Vesper." A final confirmation that he understands that Vesper did love him. She was compromised by Quantum, forced to betray him, but she still made a deal to save his life at the expense of hers. On a deeper level, he's also acknowledging to M that Vesper's death was affecting him and he did care about her. He acknowledges that revenge will not get him anywhere, and he realizes that anger and vengeance will never allow you to get over the past. The movie ends with Bond tossing Vesper's necklace in the snow. He had been carrying it with him, and Bond is able to finally put vengeance behind him. He's able to forgive himself, let go, and move forward. If we remember our theme of what do you have to give up when you love someone, for Vesper, it was everything. For Bond, he has to give up Vesper and let go the eternal feeling of having had and lost infinity.